Hey guys, hello everyone. Wanted to welcome you back. So today I wanted to do a small recap and game analysis of my most recent chess tournament. It was held in the city of Ashdod in Israel. It was a rapid chess tournament of 20 minutes for each side plus 5 seconds. I will post the full results in the description if you want to check it out. Basically, I started the tournament being rated third by rating, and I ended up on the third place in the final results. So you might say like an average tournament, pretty decent, but not that great. I held 3 victories and 2 draws, and I wanted to share with you some interesting moments, interesting positions from this tournament. So this is the first round game. So usually in such a tournament, which is a Swiss system, in the first round there might be a very big gap difference between the 2 players. So for example, here I was playing against a player which was rated somewhere maybe 400, maybe even 500 rating points below me. We reached this position after 15 moves. Now white is about to make his 16th move, and there is actually a winning combination here. If you want to stop the video and try to think about it, you're very much welcome. So the move is quite nice. It's rook takes e7. So the point is that if black takes with the bishop, then I just take it back, and we see this fork against the queen and the rook. And I will regain the exchange that I've sacrificed plus a pawn. So in the game he decided to take with the queen, but after bishop takes bishop, black is facing a very big problem because the queen obviously is under attack and she has to go, but black also needs to be aware of the threat of queen h6. So for example, if black just goes queen d7, for example, I just play queen h6 with an inevitable checkmate on the next move on g7. So he played probably the only move, which is queen to d6, keeping the bishop under attack. So now if white goes queen h6, black just collects my bishop. So I just played bishop e7 here, attacking the queen, also attacking the rook. And after queen b6, actually originally I just wanted to take the rook on f8 and be in a completely winning position, but actually when I arrived at this position I realized there is even a kind of a clearer way to win, which is just queen h6. So threatening checkmate on f8, but if the rook moves, then knight g5 is very strong, and the checkmate is inevitable. Actually from this position it's already a forced checkmate, so something like rook takes e7, queen takes h7 check, king f8, queen h8 checkmate, it's all over. So this was a good beginning for me, a relatively easy game. Let's move to the next one. So in round 2 I was facing slightly stronger player with the black pieces, but he misplayed the opening, and we reached this position in front of you after 10 moves. White's last move was the move a3. So basically white is already needs to figure out his problems, because the knight on c3 is under attack 3 times, only defended twice. If white takes the knight, is going to be in a very bad shape after bishop takes knight on c3. If the pawn recaptures the bishop, there will be a fork there, and if the king just moves, I will perhaps just collect the pawn on e5, and I will be with the pawn up and a very good position. So he tried to trick me with the move a3. And actually I said for a very long time, I mean long time for a rapid game. This was a 20 minutes game, and I maybe was thinking for maybe 7 or 8 minutes here, because I really felt like black should be winning here, because white's pieces are so hanging, and white is also uncastled. And I've decided just to go with the move which which the first move which came to mind, which is knight takes c3, which is a good move. But actually, after the game, the engine suggested that black even has a more convincing way to get the serious advantage here. And once again, you're invited to try to find it yourself if you want to stop the video. So I actually saw this kind of idea in the game, but I couldn't spot it in this specific position. The move is actually knight takes f2, which is very beautiful, because if white takes with the king, then it gets kind of skewered with the move bishop c5. And if he takes with the queen, then the queen no longer protects the knight, and we can go back to the same tactic of bishop takes c3, and black is winning. So actually, after knight takes f2, the engine says that the best move for white is just rook g1, after which it just says black should just go back to e4, and not only black won a pawn, white's castling is destroyed, and I'm also threatening some bishop c5 related ideas. White is completely losing. So knight takes f2 was actually quite a good missed chance, but I took on c3. And actually, the thing I wanted to show you is the position which arrived after this move. So he took on b4. That was a sacrifice. He intentionally allowed me to capture his rook on a1, but after queen takes c3, white is hoping that if he will be in time to play, for example, bishop d3 into castle, he will have some compensation, because my queen on a1 is really out of the game temporarily, and also in some positions she might be trapped. So white has some hopes, but the problem is that this takes too much time, and it's now black to move, and I understood that black has to play very quickly in order to neutralize white's initiative. So I played very quickly the move a5. My idea was to open up the a file to make my rook active. He has to play b5 in order to keep this file closed. And here I wanted to share a very interesting variation, which I was considering during the game, but I decided that it was too risky. So the move is, which I was considering, I didn't play it eventually, is just pushing the a pawn. A very caveman approach, just pushing the pawn without too much thinking, with the idea that when white plays bishop d3, I use that pin of the queen on a1 versus the queen on c3 to play a3, and after castles to play a2, and to place my pawn on the a2 square, just one move away from promoting. But and at first, when I've seen this idea, I was very much excited, because I thought it going to be a very convincing way to win. But it took me some time to actually understand that it's not so easy to move my queen from a1 and to make the way for the other pawn to promote. And I also figured that those dark squares around my king are very, very weak, and white can try to exploit them. For example, the move I was particularly afraid of is queen b4. The threat is very obvious, to play bishop g5, threatening queen e7 checkmate, but also threatening my queen on a1. And actually, the engine shows one particularly very beautiful variation, which goes h6. This is actually the best move that he came up with, just preventing bishop g5. And now white has a couple of choices, but one of the strongest moves that the engine shows is queen d6. The idea of this move is not immediately apparent, but you will see later on why this move is actually quite tricky to face. So black continues his strategy of trying to promote the pawn. He plays queen b1. So if the bishop takes the queen, black will just promote a new queen, and by this winning one more bishop. But actually, the plan of white is just to go bishop d2, attacking the white queen. And now it would seem that black is winning a lot of material because of the move queen takes rook check. Bishop takes rook. It's important to take with the bishop, so black cannot promote with a gain of check. And now after a1 queen, white simply plays bishop b4. And it's quite amusing that even though black is having a rook and the exchange up. A huge material advantage. He's completely hopeless here from the threats of checkmate. One of the variations of the engine goes king d8, so the black king tries to escape to the other side of the board. Pawn takes c6, threatening c7, queen a7, preventing c7, but now checkmate into c7, queen takes c7, queen e7, checkmate. So basically game over pretty soon. So because of such variations, I decided that it was too risky to go for this plan of pushing the a pawn. So I decided to stick to my original plan, which was just to take on b5. The idea is now to open up the c file. Rook c8 is now quite a significant threat. Once again, I'm using the fact that white is not castled yet. And basically now, besides the fact that black has the material advantage, I'm also very quick to develop my remaining pieces. This bishop also makes a nice pressure on this diagonal. Basically white is completely lost here and he resigned just in a couple of moves. So this was round number 2, so we have 2 out of 2. Some nice moments there. So game number 3 was one of the most difficult games I had in this tournament. And I will not go through the all of it, but just one particularly interesting moment. So it's all started from this position. I was playing with the white pieces, already facing quite a strong player, rated about maybe 2400. And in this position, my last move was recapturing a knight on f3 with my queen. And basically, I'm allowing black to make this very standard tactic of bishop takes h2, king takes h2, queen takes d4. So it would seem like black simply won a pawn there, but I actually saw a bit further and saw that I can take on f6, and if black takes with the queen, I will take his queen, I ruin his pawn structure, knight d5, and thanks to this double attack against the pawn on f6 and the pawn on c7, I win back my material and no big damage is done. So black decided to play a more solid move, which is bishop e5, protecting his knight on f6 and also attacking my knight on d4. And now, well, I will start with the move I played in the actual game. I just played knight f5, but this led to mass exchanges after bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3. We reached a position where there's very few pieces left on the board. The position is about equal. The game was actually very long. It didn't end up so quickly, but the rest of the game was very technical and nothing particularly interesting happened there. But just one variation which almost worked happened in this position, because the first move I wanted to play was not knight f5, but just to sacrifice my knight on d4 to play for quick development, so rook a to d1, defending my knight. Obviously I'm threatening all kinds of discovered attacks like knight e6 for example, so he takes the knight on d4. I play knight d5, so this move has two ideas. Obviously the one is just to take on d4, but also I'm creating pressure against this knight on f6. So the bishop cannot move, because if he just plays some move I will just take on f6 and I'm winning some material here. So he has to play the pawn to c5 to protect the bishop, and so at the moment black is a piece up, but I really tried to make this move rook takes d4 work. So the idea is after pawn takes d4, knight takes f6 check, pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6. His queen is under attack, but I'm also threatening checkmate in a couple of moves with the move queen g3. So at the first moment I thought this might be a very good idea, but I spotted the fact that he can play the defensive move queen to d7 with the idea to block with his queen on g4 when I check it. And actually this move ruins my whole plan. And actually, if white has no immediate checkmate, you will be just left with a rook down for no compensation. So I couldn't play this variation and ended up playing the move knight f5, which I just showed you, and the game ended up in a draw. So we have 2.5 out of 3 points. So game number 4 was very critical. Already, once again, facing quite a decent player, about 2300, maybe 2200 rated. So once again, I don't want to show the whole game, so not to make this video too long. I just wanted to stick to one very critical point in this game, which actually was my opponent's very critical mistake, I think. This is move number 29, and this is material equality, but black is having two things which might kind of suggest that he is having the very slight advantage. First of all, the fact that his king is slightly more centralized in the upcoming endgame, and the second fact is that white is having this weak pawn on e5, which can be a target for black to attack at some point. And I have this very solid control over the central square of d5, which white cannot really challenge because it's a light square, and he is having the dark square bishop. But these are all minimal kind of advantages. If white plays very solidly, he should be able to hold a draw, I believe. But he played the move which seems very natural, which is pawn to g3, trying to drive away my knight from the active f4 square. But I think at this point he missed my next intermediate move, and I've seen this in advance, that my plan was not to drive away my knight, but rather to play rook to d7. I think this was a very big miss by him, because now if the knight from d4 goes somewhere, doesn't really matter where, I have this check with knight e2 winning material. And if he tries to defend the knight with a move like bishop b6, actually I can also just play this fork knight e5, but also the move rook takes d4 probably works with the same idea of going knight e2. This is why he plays. In the game he was forced to make a concession and to play the move pawn takes f4, rook takes d4, but now thanks to this exchange, first of all my rook got activated. He has a lot of targets to attack. Those pawns on the f file are extremely difficult to defend and are very likely to fall in the next part of the game. And from this point onwards, the game went downhill for white. I just started collecting pawns throughout the board, and eventually won quite convincingly. So it was a very critical win for me. So now we are standing at 3.5 points out of 4. So, but at this point I must say that was one player in the tournament, I think even two players, who had a perfect result of 4 out of 4, which I didn't play against. And I also didn't play against them in the final round because they played against each other. So I actually in the next round faced the second seed player by rating, which was slightly higher than me in the rapid ratings. And once again, the game itself was not that interesting. And after, but it was extremely crucial for the both of us to win the game, because this was the only way to fight for the first places. But he played extremely solidly, and after 27 moves, we reached this very drawish position. But it's white to move, and I decided, because I was very much desperate to win the game. This is a completely symmetrical position. Obviously, draw is a very probable result in this position. But I decided to provoke my opponent to go for some tactics which I thought might be in my favor, might also not be in my favor, but I thought I have nothing to lose, because drawing this game or losing this game doesn't really have all that much difference, but winning it might mean that I can still fight for the first place. So I played this, okay, the move itself is very natural, this rook c1, just trying to fight for the open file for my rook, trying to get active. But it's kind of provoking this little tactic rook takes bishop, with the idea that if I just take back on e3, I will be forked once again with my king and rook. But my idea was to play this intermediate check rook c8, king h7, and only now to take on e3 once my rook is safe. But this is very tricky because he still took on e3, king g2, and so now white is having a minor material advantage, but my king position is very exposed, and I might get under attack because also my pieces are a little bit far away from the defense. And one more thing that might be in black's favor is the fact that my pieces are a bit hanging in the air. The rook and the queen might be difficult to protect in some variations. So he played the move queen e2 here, check, and after we kind of played a couple of moves just standing in our places, he was already prepared to make a draw, but I once again decided that I have to try to play for the win. I went king h3, which is a very risky move, but I thought I calculated. Once again, we are playing in a very sharp time trouble, by the way. We only have a couple of seconds left, each of us. So he played queen f1 check, continuing to pursue my king. I played king g4, and I thought that this will be maybe the end of his checks. But actually after queen e2 check, I kind of forgot in advance that I cannot block with my queen on f3, because then he just plays h5 check, and when my king moves I will lose my queen. So the move queen f3 is actually impossible, so I have to retreat with my king on h3 and just to accept the draw, which is what happened. But actually things might got tricky if he would actually not play the move queen e2 check, but try to play the tricky move g6. So this move has a couple of ideas. First of all, to shelter all potential checks that white has on this diagonal, and also creating some threats of h5 or f5, trying to checkmate me. And actually, if my opponent would play this move, I would have to find only one move which draws in this position. All other moves apparently lose. The move is not that difficult, but you know, with a couple of seconds on the clock, everything could have happened. The move is rook to c7. This move has 2 points, very important points. First of all, to create obviously the threat of rook takes f7, which forces black to react, but also very important, taking away this square from the black bishop. So for example, now if black plays h5 check, king h4, now the move bishop e7 might have been a checkmate if I wouldn't have the rook on c7. And in this position, black can still draw with the move queen f6 check, king h3, queen f1, and so on. Obviously, I still cannot play queen g2 because then again I'm still losing after queen f5 check, g4. Yeah, maybe I even don't lose, but at the very least black has a draw with queen d3 check, queen g3, and the same mechanism of checks. I just cannot escape it. Probably black even wins if he plays precisely queen g2 and just pawn takes g4. I think at this point black is winning. I cannot maintain my queen, and if king g3, then there is actually bishop d6, and that's it. White has to sacrifice his queen. So the game would still end up in a draw if I just play king h4 and so on. But it would be, let's say, a draw that I still need to find a very precise move. So it probably, in a regular situation, I would not provoke my opponent and risk playing such a move like rook c1, which I did. But once again, I felt like I have to try something. So this game also ended up in a draw. The final result was 4 points out of 5. This meant third place for me. So one player took actually 5 points out of 5, but he didn't face any of the 3 top players, if I believe. And one player had 4.5 points. So and I with 4 points had the third place. Once again, I will post the full results on the description if you want to check it out. And I want you guys to thank you for watching. And once again, if you like the content on this channel, I invite you to subscribe and to share the videos and to support this channel in every way that you find suitable for you. So thank you, really, guys. See you. Bye bye.